She asked if the murder was ever solved. I knew somebody was going to ask that, and the fact is, I do not remember.
I Googled that, and it said that they were never solved.
Oh, well, there you go. That's all.
I think a lot of us would love to hear how you transitioned to writing about the border in Mexico and what you think those experiences brought to covering the border.
Well, first of all, you know, from living down here for several years, you pick up all of these scraps of information and what's going on, and you actually see it. I mean, I can recall like 20 years ago when it was really bad, driving up in the San Rafael Valley and literally seeing drug mules diving into ditches because they thought I might be border patrol or the cops or somebody. So it occurred to me that there was a story, it was a novel. I don't know, I gotta tell you, Gary, I don't know what the process is, even though I follow it. It just occurred to me that it would be a story, and I started to write it. And, as usually happens at the beginning of a work, I had no idea what I was doing, where I was going, but eventually it revealed itself to me. And again, I finished it pretty quickly. Probably the experiences that I had, like the ones I described in this little talk, figured into it because I had an interest, I don't know if that's the right word, but I had an interest in human violence. And obviously the border was quite violent then. I wanted to explore it further in different contexts, and that's what I did. I don't know if that answers your question, probably doesn't. But
Phil, how did you end up in Patagonia? How did you get here?
The late Jim Harrison, who's a very close friend of mine, had lived here for several years. He also lived in Michigan, where I used to go bird hunting a lot. So one day, it would have been about 1998 or 9 or something like that, I was up on a hunting trip, ran into Jim at this bar that we all hung out in a little town called Grand Marais, Michigan. And I told him that I was living, as I still do, part of the year in Connecticut. And I told him that how I hated New England winters. And I really found them very depressing. And he said, well, he lived in this town in Arizona. He said, there's lots of public land around there, a lot of room to roam around. It's good bird hunting. And he says, and he said the town of Patagonia was unusual. It wasn't just typical kind of Mayberry or anything like that. It was a really interesting little place. And so Leslie, my wife, and I decided we'd drive down instead of heading to Florida or some other place. And we really liked it. And have been coming here ever since. I think it's like 26 years now, something like that.
How long did it take you to decide that you wanted to stay in Patagonia? Was it a pretty quick decision, Phil? Or
Yeah.
did it take a year or two?
It was almost immediate, I would say. Probably after the first year or two, for sure I wanted to stay. And then, luckily, somebody told me that this little house we live in right down the street here was for sale, it was affordable, so we bought it. Here we are. Gotta need more.
You and Jim Harrison are maybe friends and you and Bird hunting together down here?
I'm sorry, I couldn't catch
You
it.
and Jim Harrison remain friends and you and he went bird hunting down here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we stayed friends until, in fact, this was, I was almost present at his death. Somebody, a friend of ours, a doctor actually, called me and said that Jim died apparently in Hartford, in his house down the road a ways. And, yeah, we stayed friends. I got to tell you, is that being friends with Jim was something of a job. He was not the easiest guy in the world, but we did remain friends. Yes, ma'am.
What are you working on these days? Anything? Writing?
I didn't quite catch that.
What are you working on these days? What are you writing? Anything?
Well, I'm working on another novel. It's not coming along, I gotta tell you very well, but they never do when I first started. But I am going to publish later this year or early next. They haven't given me an exact update. I'm going to publish a collection of short stories.
Nice.
It's called Wandering Souls.
I like it. Wow.
Sir.
As a Marine veteran, how did you feel about the Democratic Convention in Chicago in '68?
You mean the one in '68?
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I actually covered that.
I was wondering.
I mean, I can't say I covered it in the sense that there were 8,000 reporters around, and I was just told that I was just a cub reporter at that time. I happened to live in the city, fairly near Lincoln Park, which was the gathering ground for the protests. And well, I'll tell you a story. This is how I feel about it. And my car, which was a nifty little bright red Triumph Spitfire, was parked in front of my apartment on Sedgwick Avenue. And like a lot of reporters, I used to get away with parking in no parking zones. I'm putting a big blue press card in my windshield. It was issued to all of us, everybody that was reported, and it said in letters about that big, it said press. And in letters also pretty big, it said Cook County Sheriff. It was the issuing agency. So I was walking back to my apartment from Lincoln Park, and I saw, I can't remember how many it was 2, 3, or 4 Chicago cops kind of running down the street, I think pursuing some SDS protesters. And one of them saw this big press card in there, and he took his billy club and smashed my windshield. Christ. So I went up to the apartment. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. And while I was there, I can't remember what I was doing there, but I happened to look out the window. Oh, I remember. There was tear gas all over the place. And I had the windows open. And I went to the window to close it, and I saw 4 or 5 SDS types in football helmets and with clubs. And they saw this cracked windshield with Cook County Sheriff. And they finished the job. And I lost my windshield. say that the way I felt about it was I was kind of neutral. I thought everybody was a jerk.
So Phil, did you cover the riots in Chicago when Martin Luther King was assassinated?
No, I did not cover those. In fact, I had a kind of personal mission at the time. My sister's apartment was very near some of the areas that riots were occurring. And my parents asked me, called me and said that I should drive in and pick her up and get her out of there and bring her out to the burbs. And I did. And I saw a lot of stuff in the way. I did not cover. Yeah.
Bill, when you look at the world now as a journalist, and we've talked before, and we look back historically, the state of the press and the disregard for the press in a free world, do you have any thoughts looking back or looking towards the future with the current events that are happening now with discrediting journalism?
Well, you know, journalism has been discredited ever since it was invented. It really is. I mean, I think back is that Mayor Daley was always agreeing against the press in Chicago. So was everybody else. And so I don't find the current administration's complaints about the press to be, they're maybe louder and more militant, so to speak, than some of the previous ones, but they're in that tradition, if you want to call it that. You know, everybody loves the press when they got a story to tell, when they want some publicity or advertising, and everybody hates it when they tell the truth. So I don't find all that much difference in it in that sense. What I do find is different, of course, is the decline in the influence of the daily newspaper and the emphasis now on websites and online journalism. I mean, my younger son is a reporter for a website called Axios, and he does a good job, but these digital journalism doesn't seem to have the impact that newspapers did, nor I might say the authority. What bothers me about it is that it seems to lack the power that the press used to have. And it's so scattered that it's difficult for anybody, including me. I think I'm pretty hit on what's supposed to be in news stories. And I go through my news feed every day, and it confuses the hell out of me. I can't tell, you know, a lot of times what's really going on. I saw that this morning. I saw some story to the effect of, I don't know, I don't remember the exact words, but it was that there's some guy running for a Democratic seat in the Midwest was thought, no, in Florida, was thought to be a real candidate to start winning Florida back for the Democrats. And the next story was all about how Trump has outstanding polls, and everybody loves it. And I said, well, I don't know what's, is everybody voting? I don't. That to me is one of the big differences. Yeah.
In your upcoming collection of short stories, are any
set in Key West?
No,
No.
sorry. None of them are.
How about Patagonia?
No. Not in Patagonia either. There's one set, two are set in Vietnam. One is set in Cambodia. A third in, just to get non-exotic about it, in Ohio. And can't remember where the others are. Not in Patagonia or Key West. Sir?
How did you manage to navigate yourself around during the fall of Saigon? I mean, that must have been a very difficult time to remain safe and still get,
What?
remain safe and still get the job done.
Well, you know, we stuck together. This guy that I mentioned here, Nick Crawford, he and I both covered the fall of Saigon, he for Newsweek and me for the Tribune. I mean, we were both parts of the team. And we looked out for each other and often went out to cover stories together. You know, when you attain a certain amount of savvy about what to do and where to go, I know that there were certain signs that you might be in a place you should not be. And one of those signs, for example, was this: all of a sudden, you didn't see any refugees, any traffic, anything. It was eerily quiet. And that's the kind of place that you didn't want to go in. Because usually that meant that you were probably going to get ambushed. I have a funny story. I don't know if it's illustrative of an answer to your question. One of the guys that I covered the war with, besides Nick, was the famed gonzo journalist Hunter Thompson. And Hunter, who was, you know, a smart guy, but he knew that he was a bit out of his element as a war correspondent. So he attached himself to Nick and me. And there was a battle going on at that time northeast of Saigon, in a little village called Xuan Van. And the South Vietnamese regiment was trying to hold back the advance of the North Vietnamese. And it was pretty dicey. And so we drove up to within maybe a couple hundred yards of the village, had the driver pull the Jeep off to where it was hidden, and we started to walk up. And there was mortar fire coming, stuff like that. And Hunter, who was a big guy, 6'3" or something like that, he was walking behind us, and he was obviously very nervous. And especially when North Vietnamese machine gun opened fire on the Vietnamese positions, and some of the rounds started to crack over our heads. And we said, well, we're out of here. So we all three got back in the Jeep, and we were driving back. And I don't know, Hunter was, if you know anything about him, he was a big drinker. And he was popping something in his mouth, I don't know what it was. And we were partway back in one of these kind of quiet zones. All of a sudden, he lets out a blood-curdling scream. And just as 3 or 4 South Vietnamese fighter jets flew over, and we thought, you know, did they drop some ordnance? Was he hit? What happened? And because of the scream, the driver got scared and jerked the wheel of the Jeep. It went off the road, down into a ditch, and there it was like this. And Nick turned around and says, Hunter, I says, you okay, man? You all right? And Hunter said, you see those big pterodactyls up in the sky? And then I left back in the back seat and actually started to strangle him. I pulled Nick off of 100 pounds of life, I guess. I don't know if that tells you anything. But it's amusing.
And they love those horse stories.
What?
Love those horse stories.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay.
Have you written any subsequent memoir or anything of that sort to reward? Your stories are so wonderful.
You mean, did I write like a sequel to it?
Yeah, a sequel.
No, not really. I think the closest thing, here, I'll show it to you. This one. This is an account of my various experiences as a foreign correspondent, means of escape, it's called. That's probably the closest thing to a sequel. I've done before. All right. Yes.
I'm curious, your novel, The Voyage, did you or your agent or publisher put that up for the Pulitzer?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear what you said.
The Voyage,
Yeah.
that was an excellent book.
Thank
Did you or your publisher put that up for the Pulitzer?
Oh, well, I know I didn't. The Pulitzer Committee works with a John Desai, reporters who, or writers who submit their own books. I don't know. I don't think he did. As a matter of fact, it's the job of the publisher to do that. Not an agent. And
Well, did the publisher submit it? Because the Pulitzer only looks at works that are submitted by.
you'll have to excuse me, but among my, I said I'm almost 84, I don't hear so well. I
Same here. Well, I mean, the Pulitzer Board just doesn't randomly look at books. They only look at books that are submitted.
yeah,
I'm just curious if the book was submitted.
I have no idea.
It was a Pulitzer-worthy book.
Well, I hope you end up on the committee. Could use a voice during my years. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to do an auctioneer thing, going once, going twice. That's it.
lens.
Yeah, it's a 28 135. Yeah.
How long have you had the Canon?
This one I've had maybe just a few months, but I've had a Canon 1D for like 15 years. So it's the same lenses, but it's the Mark IV 5D.
So it's a mirrorless, right?
No, it's
So you haven't done with mirrorless?
No, I've not. I decided not to. I made a point because I don't need mirrorless super high speed for like sport action. You know, it's like really, the mirrorless is for super high speed activity like action, I believe.
What is a mirror?
You know, I don't know. I thought videos are for my purposes. I have the previous version of the 5D. And including the lenses, I have a whole set of really good IS lenses. I think they're not, I don't know if they're compatible with the mirrorless.
I think so, with Canon. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like there's an adapter. I shot Sony when Sony was like the leader in the mirrorless camera thing, and now I'm back to Nikon because I'm just kind of brand new, right? It's pretty cool because the cameras are a lot smaller.